we missed our deadline. Yeah, we had a self-imposed deadline of this coming weekend, Labor Day weekend, to have Bottle Rocket up and running. I'm not surprised we missed our deadline. There's a lot to this stuff. This was going to be a Bottle Rocket update, but instead I think we're going to do a separate video on the realities of building cars, okay? Because, you know, all right, so you guys who've been doing this for a while, you're familiar with this whole drill. But we have, I would say out of our audience, probably 3/4 of you guys are dreamers, meaning that, you know, you're planning on building your first car, you want to build your first car, you want to, you know, and you're working towards it, and you're watching these videos trying to learn and you watch the TV shows and you watch the other YouTube channels. And unfortunately, the reality of it is that we collectively in the automotive media do you guys a great injustice, a great disservice, because we don't actually show you, we don't take the time to explain to you the details, you know? Like, okay, so for instance, you're watching a TV show, okay? And here comes the car, right? And you know, here's the plan for the car. And then the next scene you see 12 guys dive on the car. And then the next scene you see everything being toted off to the sandblaster, the media blaster. And then you see everything going to the body shop and there's 5 guys dive on there and they're sanding everything. They don't show you the details. And especially if you're building a car yourself, you're doing it yourself and you're doing it on a low budget, you know, the way all of us really do it, man, the reality of building a car and the fantasy of building a car are two completely different things. So, I'm not making excuses for why we missed the deadline. I'm going to show you, I'm going to try to give you guys an idea of what actually goes on, what you're up against when you're taking on an endeavor like this. And when I say an endeavor like this, is here's a car that we didn't do any body work to. All we did was pull weight out of it and then basically re-engineer the entire drivetrain. Engine, transmission, rear, electrical system, doing the nitrous. We'll get to that in a minute. Come this way. Glory of building a car, right? The vision that you have, right, is being under the hood and flogging and putting on the newest piece and tightening this and then slamming the hood and going for a ride, right? No, come here. This is the reality of building a car. The reality of building a car is that you're going to spend more time here at the bench grinder, cleaning bolts, cleaning threads, getting stuff ready to put on the car, because you can't do things half-assed, right? You shouldn't do things half-assed. Every bolt, like for instance, you take a car apart. Let's say you're going to do a water pump on a car, right? So it takes you an hour to do the water pump, right, on your car. But let's say you're building something from scratch and you're going to do this water pump. That water pump is going to take you an entire day, right? Because you've got to fit the right water pump, you know, obviously you got the right water pump for the motor. Then you have to fit the pulleys to it. Then you've got to find the bolts for it, all of the bolts. In this case, there's like 5 different length bolts that go to that water pump. And then you've got to clean them and all. It takes a ridiculous amount of time to work through all of the details. And then the pulleys, of course, you know, because we're starting from scratch now. So you got to find the right pulleys. And if you don't have the right pulleys, you have to make the pulleys you have work. Then there's the brackets. The alternator spacing has to be just so. You can literally spend the entire day just fitting a water pump to a fresh project. This is a time killer. If I was to guess, we've probably got about 550 to 600 hours so far wrapped up in Project Bottle Rocket. And at least a third of that is in finding all of the right hardware, spacing things out the right way, making sure that, you know, everything is uniform, that all of the valve cover bolts are the same, that all of the intake manifold bolts are the same, that all of them are cleaned and ready to go. Because making things uniform is a crucial part of building a car. I know it sounds crazy, it sounds anal, but when you have to service this car and you've got it all broken down, you don't need to find, well, okay, well this one here, this fits here, and oh, this one doesn't go there, and oh, you can't put the wrench on this one because it's in here, so you got to use it. No, you want to be able to take it apart and put it back together again like a human. Taking it apart and putting it back together again, making things serviceable. That's what we're doing right now. Okay, here's an example. So we're using the stock throttle cable on this car. But now the carburetor was originally a 2-barrel, obviously, so now it's our 754 barrel. And the throttle cable doesn't match anymore, so we had to fabricate this throttle cable. And we had to do it in such a way that it didn't interfere with anything else. So now the throttle cable matches to our pivot point on the carburetor. You can see the bracket we added right there. But now we found that when you flat punch this, when it goes all the way down, the cable isn't, the pedal isn't bottomed out. So now we need to come up with a positive stop for the cable to keep all of the foot pressure off this little lead ball that they stick in the end of this. So there's some more engineering that has to be done. Engineering. So what we've done here is we've positioned and set everything in this car. So like, for example, you could take either of the valve covers off without disturbing any of the fuel system. The ignition system is going to be routed, the plug wires and everything will be routed in such a way that they can be removed without disturbing anything in the nitrous system. The positioning of bits and pieces, like for instance, here's our accessory, here's our dedicated nitrous system. The way everything has to be positioned, here's a fuel inlet for it, and here's this, and someplace in between is going to be a filter. And then here's our main fuel line. And we're bringing a main fuel line around this way, but remember our headers are going to be here, and we've got this here. So in order to have the fuel line come around and not get into the header heat and not have any sharp bends to come around this is where we ended up mounting the regulator, so that we can have a gradual bend come down like this and connect to the bottom of it. This was the optimum position to put this. And then of course we've got our shortest run here between the regulator and the inlet for the carburetor. And again, there'll be a filter in here also. All of this stuff takes time. This is all very carefully planned out, very carefully engineered. Lamb Chop right now is working on the wiring of this car. So to give you an idea, because now we've got non-stock systems going in here. So we still have to fabricate the floor to clear the shifter and all of that. But now here's our nitrous plate. So one switch arms the system. Wait, how does this go now? Hey, Lamb Chop, come here, man. You see, I don't even know what's going on. I'm building this freaking car, and I don't even know what's going on. All right, explain to the people what these switches are for now.
This is going to turn our fuel pump on.
This turns the main fuel pump on.
Yep.
This turns.
That's a 2-position. That's for our nitrous.
Okay.
To arm the nitrous.
So this is the main fuel system in the car, and then this is the nitrous system in the car. So this will turn on the pump and arm and the solenoids.
Yep.
Energize the solenoids. And then what goes here?
Purge button.
Okay, so our purge button is going to go over here. And then
this way there in the street.
For our retard, oh yeah, there you go. There's our purge button. That'll fit in there. Then you're making a
hot nickel cut into there.
Oh, sweet.
Goes a 5-cent washer, baby.
Nice.
Fits the hole perfectly, and then the timing toggle switch will be in there.
Right, we've got our timing retard toggle switch is going to go here in the old radio position, and then the gauges. You made a gauge plate to mount where it's not interfering with the shifter, and it fits neatly underneath the dashboard. All of this stuff takes time, a lot of time. These are the realities of building a car. And you know, here's the thing, the mock-up procedure, because you've got to put things together several times before you know how they're all going to fit together. Example of this, right? So we mounted our battery box, and we have the ground. The ground was all self-explanatory to our switch, but now we're going to run the hot up to the starter. But you can only go so far, because we don't have our drive shaft in there, we don't have our transmission in there, we don't have our clutch can in there, we don't have any of those linkages set up, we don't have our exhaust in place. So we can't run that effectively run that wire until all of those other systems are in place, and we know that it's not going to clear, it's not going to, interfere with anything. These are the realities of building a car. It is time consuming. If you think something is going to take an hour, it's going to take a day. If you think you'll have it together in a week, count on it lasting a month before you get it all done. If you put something together the first time and you don't really think the whole thing through, count on taking it apart 2, 3, 4, 5 times until it all fits together and nothing is all jumbled in a place. There's 2 key things to remember when building a car, right? Keep things clean. Now, clean doesn't mean that everything has to be surgical. It means that when you're putting this thing together, make sure all of the threads on the bolts are clean. Make sure the heads on the bolts are clean. Make sure that when you're putting things together, you do it in a sanitary way, that things aren't all meshed together. Because when you've got to troubleshoot this thing, and you will have to troubleshoot it because things are going to go wrong, all of the best laid plans of mice and men, right? You can do it like a gentleman, You can actually say, okay, well, these wires go to the ignition switch. These wires go to the nitrous. You want to run everything as cleanly and as sanitarily as possible. And you want to plan. You want to plan every single move, so that things aren't clashing and interfering. So, I mean, the first step of planning of the car is to plan all of the systems, what you're going to put in place. And then the second stage of planning is how you're going to integrate those systems into a cohesive package that becomes the car. So that's for, oh yeah, one other thing. You're building on a budget, right? So one of the things we found, the motor isn't in position right now because there's no clutch on it, but one of the things we found is that we have no clearance between our carburetor and our hood. Very little clearance, I should say. And in fact, this rib right here has to come out. So we mill down the choke tower, and all of this over here will be blended nicely by the time we're done. But we need some sort of, isolator, some sort of velocity stack. Where do you find something like that? K&N sells what they call a stub stack, but those things are like $50. You got to order the thing, right? So I figured, well, the other day we were in Habitat for Humanity. We were just looking for odds and ends for the house. So it's there. So they had a couple of these things on the shelf. I'm not even really sure it is. It's like it's some sort of light fixture housing, right? So I bought a couple. They were $1 each, right? So I'll figure out something like that. So I cut the center of it out to match the filter house or the air cleaner housing on that, and boom, there's our stub stack. Total investment was $1 and about 10 minutes worth of cutting, and we'll hold it down in place with springs or something like that. Here, come here. Right, here's another. When we set up our nitrous system here, we use this plate. Now we blocked off manifold heat, so I'm not worried about heat getting to the carburetor. But we use this plate over here as a shelf, so that when we're going to change jets in here, we can rest our jets and whatnot on this little plate, give ourselves a place to work, so that we're not fumbling around down here. So it's like all little things like that. You got to think through every little bit of it. I'm starting to ramble on now, right? Yeah, I know, because my head is doing this and not really into making videos. So we're going to keep going, and I think that's it, right? That's our update, and that's our video. So I'm going back to work. I'll see you tomorrow.